Today we're going to talk about reading bar graphs. Reading bar graphs is very similar to reading picture graphs, only with some slight changes. We follow these steps. First, we want to take a look at what does the graph show. We check the title, categories, and the scale, and we mark up the graph. Then we review each question and think about what information do we need to answer the question. Today, as you read bar graphs, you're going to solve some problems that go with the bar graphs, and some of these are going to be problems with more than one step. So make sure you pay attention to the examples that I go over because they will be just like some of the work you do in your book today. Okay, here's an example of a bar graph. The first thing I do is look and see what information does the graph show. I see the title is favorite cake, so this bar graph is going to teach me all about different types of cake. The categories are along the bottom. This is a vertical bar graph. I see that the different types of cake are chocolate, yellow, marble, and white. And finally, I take a look at the scale to see what this graph counts by. I can see that this graph is counting by 1. This graph is a little bit different because they chose to put the numbers on the side of the graph, as you can see here, in the middle of a bar. I think it's better when they're right on the edge, just like a ruler, but they didn't make it this way. So we're going to have to be really careful when we count to make sure our counting is accurate. So let's go ahead and mark up the graph and figure out how many of each type of cake there are. So I'm actually going to count each square. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7. I can mark this as 7. If I didn't pay attention to how the scale was set up in the beginning, I might have gotten tricked and marked this as 8. So that's why it's so important to look at that scale before you start marking up your graph. When I count the yellow slices or favorites, 1, 2, 3. Marble, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And white had 1 vote. That's an example of one type of scale you might see. Here's a graph with a different kind of scale. I'm going to start by looking at the title, which is Joel's Snack Stand Sales, which tells me that this is all going to be about different kinds of snacks that were sold. The different categories will show the kinds of snacks. There are chocolate bars, soft pretzels, bags of popcorn, lollipops, and bags of chips. It's important to know the different categories so that you can answer questions about them. And finally, I'm going to take a look at that scale. This scale is different than the last one because, as you can see, it counts by 5s. We always want to make sure we look and see what the scale looks like. Let's go ahead and mark up the graph. For chocolate bars, I can see that the bar goes all the way up to the 20, so 20 chocolate bars were sold. There were 15 soft pretzels sold, 10 bags of popcorn, 5 lollipops, and 15 bags of chips sold. Now we'll answer some questions about this graph. Remember, as we answer our questions, we want to think, what information do we need to answer the question? Alexis sold 5 fewer soft pretzels than Joel. How many soft pretzels did Alexis and Joel sell in all? So this question asks us to figure out the pretzels sold in all. And in order to do that math, we'll need to know Joel's pretzels and add them to Alexis's pretzels to find the total number of pretzels. But I don't see anything about Alexis's pretzels on the bar graph. That tells me that I'm probably going to have to do another step. I see that the bar graph tells me that Joel sold 15 pretzels, but again, I don't know how many pretzels Alexis sold, and I don't know how many pretzels were sold in all. So the first step will be figuring out how many pretzels Alexis sold, because again, that information is not on the bar graph. In order to figure out the pretzels that Alexis sold, I'll need to use the information given to me on the bar graph and the information given to me in the word problem. and then compare them. I'm going to set up my comparison bars and think about it. Okay, well, the problem says that Alexis sold 5 fewer soft pretzels than Joel, or 5 less. So that tells me that Joel sold the most and Alexis sold the least. We know from the graph that Joel sold 15 soft pretzels. And we know from the word problem that Alexis sold 5 fewer soft pretzels than Joel. So I can figure out the missing piece by doing 15 minus 5 to learn that Alexis sold 10 pretzels. Now I can solve the second step. Alexis's pretzels were 10 pretzels, so 15 plus 10 equals 25 pretzels sold in all. For this problem, I had to use information that I got from the word problem and information given to me in the bar graph. That will be just like the problems you are going to do today. Sometimes the problem gets a little bit tricky and we have to think carefully about the categories. This problem asks, how much more candy was sold than bags of popcorn? How much more candy was sold than bags of popcorn? Here I'm comparing candy versus popcorn. When I take a look at my graph and I take a closer look at the categories, I can see that there are actually 2 different types of candies on the graph. There are chocolate bars and lollipops. Both of those are candies. So before I solve and compare candy versus popcorn, I have to find the total candy that was sold by adding the chocolate sold to the lollipop sold. There was 20 chocolate bars sold and 5 lollipops sold, so 25 pieces of candy were sold in all. Now I can compare candy and popcorn. 25 pieces of candy were sold and 10 bags of popcorn were sold. I can see that when I look just at the popcorn column, because bags of chips isn't a type of popcorn and soft pretzels isn't a type of popcorn. So I only need to look at popcorn. That tells me that candy is going to be the greatest number and popcorn the least. 25 pieces of candy were sold and 10 bags of popcorn were sold. So there were 10 more candies sold than bags of popcorn. That's the difference. Remember, as you are solving these problems, you want to use the information in the word problem and the information given to you in the graphs. You're going to have to take your time and look carefully at both the scale and the different categories and make sure you're thinking about what information do you need to solve first and what do you need to solve second. You might find it helpful to ask yourself, what pieces of information am I missing? Or you might find it helpful to split up your workspace like I did and write out the title for step 1 and step 2 for yourself. Good luck!